Welcome to this Backspace Academy lab on programming AWS Lambda. So in part one of this lab, we're going to look at AWS Lambda, of course, and we're going to create an AWS Lambda function. Now, Lambda is a unique service of AWS, and it's unique in that you run NodeJS code on AWS services, but you don't have to actually create an architecture, and you don't have to implement any of those services to run that NodeJS code. So all you have to worry about is writing code, and AWS looks after the rest. And it's a little bit similar to the S3 service, where you don't have to worry about managing EC2 instances and auto scaling and all this sort of thing, and load balancing and whatever. You just concentrate on running on writing code, which is great. So for front-end developers who just don't want to worry too much about back-end architecture, this is really good. And it's really good from the perspective that you only pay for the time that you use. So if you use one or 2 milliseconds of time, then you're really only going to be paying for that or close to it. So it's very cost effective. It's very hands-off as far as worrying about uptime and availability and that sort of thing. So it's a great service, and certainly great service for front-end, for providing a back-end to a front-end application. So once we've created that AWS Lambda function, we're going to do that in the console. We'll test that Lambda function in the console as well. Then we're going to look at getting our browser application that we created previously that used the S3 service for a back-end database. What we're going to do is invoke our Lambda function through that same browser application, and then we're also going to get that browser application to delete the Lambda function. So in effect, we're going to create Lambda Node.js server-side capabilities for our browser application. So in part two of this, we're going to look at another way of invoking a Lambda function, and that's through S3 events. And we'll have a look at the different types of S3 events, and then we'll look at how we can use those S3 events to automatically trigger an AWS Lambda function. And we're going to use the image magic Node.js package, and we're going to use that to process images and to create a thumbnail of those images. So this could be useful, for example, if you've got a social network that has profile pictures, and they might be huge pictures, and you want to be able to process them down to a standard size. So it's quite common for that sort of function to happen, and you want that to automatically happen when the resource is available. So an S3 event would be perfect for that. Okay, so we're just now in the AWS Lambda console. So just select that from services. So just going to have a bit of a read of the stuff here. So we've got here the benefits of AWS Lambda, which is quite interesting. So we've got here respond quickly to new information. So that's, we don't have to worry about our services being overloaded and they're not going to be able to respond quickly to that new information. We can run our code without managing any infrastructure. And it's very cost effective and efficient. So we're going to be running our code only when it's needed, and with no unnecessary overhead or costs, and we're going to be paying in very, very small units of time. So there's in a nutshell what the advantages of AWS Lambda are, and so that's quite a good introduction to it. So we'll just click on now Get Started now, and we're going to create our own new Lambda function. So we won't use any of these blueprints. So we're just going to create our own one. So we just skip that. Okay, so we'll give our function a name. So we're just going to call this backspace-lambda-lab and give it a similar description. We're going to be running Node.js on our Lambda function. So we do have the option of, at this point in time, of running Java as well. So when this first was released as a service, when Lambda was first released, Node.js was the only language that you could use. So now they've added Java to that, which is quite good, and they'll probably be looking at adding more languages as time goes on. But at the time of creating this video, we have Node.js and Java. Okay, so we have another options here to hand our code over to the Lambda function. So we've got here, we can do it with an inline editor. We can upload a zip file from our local system, or we can upload a zip file from Amazon S3. So we're just going to paste in from our lab notes. So what this code is going to do is the first thing when the function is loading, it's going to console log out a message there. It's telling us that. Now our actual NodeJS code is going to be residing within exports.handler inside that function there. So what we're going to be doing is just console logging out some keys that we're going to pass to the function, and on success we're also going to console log out the first value key on there. So that's just really a very simple application. Doesn't get much more simple than that. So we'll just now have a look at the next sections that we've got to have a look at. So Lambda function, handler, and role. Okay, so we need to actually create a role for our AWS Lambda service to access other services and to run. So without a role, it won't actually work. So if we wanted to access S3 services, whatever, we'd need to give it an IAM role to do that. So instead of going into IAM and creating a role, which is quite tedious, and then coming back again and then selecting that role, we've already got some here that we can also already use. So we've got here create new role, and we can use basic execution role, or we can look at an S3 execution role, and that will take us into the service, and we just click on allow if we wanted to do that. So we're actually going to use the basic execution role. So we just click on basic execution role. So we just allow that. Okay, and we'll just leave the memory and timeout pretty well the same. If we had a pretty complex application, we'd probably want to look at increasing that timeout value, but this is doesn't get much more simpler than this, so 3 seconds should be fine. So just click on next. Okay, so here's a summary of it. So it's backspace Lambda lab, NodeJS, and there we go. So that's fine. Create function. Okay, and there is our function there. So now that we've created our function, we can look at testing it. So let's just click on test, and we can do that from the console here. And we've got a number of sample test event templates. So we're just going to use the hello world one, which is what we've created our Node.js application to respond to. And so it's just passing those 3 keys of value 3, value 1, and whatever. So I'm just going to change that a little bit. Okay, it's just going to pass through there. This is value 1, value 2, value 3 for those keys. So we just submit that in. Okay, so let's just have a look at that. So here we can see the summary, and what it's executed out there is upon success, context.succeed event key 1. So that's what it's outputted there upon success. So execution result succeeded, and that's what's been output there. So let's have a look at the log output here. So it started, and then it's outputted. This is value 1, this is value 2, this is value 3. So it's got there, which is what we were expecting here. So value 1 equals, this is value 1, value 2, value 3. So that's worked well, and our build duration is 100 milliseconds. And we've used 128 meg, and so that's what we will get billed for. So as you can see there, the duration of our Lambda function went for 69.75 milliseconds, and we're going to get billed for 100 milliseconds. So this is really, really good, really cost effective for us. So we're only paying down to a few milliseconds or so for our service. So this is not too useful as a function. You can't do everything from the console. It kind of defeats the purpose. So what we're going to do now is connect our application that we created before that uses the S3 service as a back-end key store database, and we're going to give that Lambda capabilities. So we're going to go in and into our IAM console, and we're going to need to create an IAM role for our application to access the Lambda service. So let's just go into the IAM console. So we first need to create a policy. So what we're going to do is copy our policy that we did for our service, for our application, sorry. So our Facebook backspace policy, and I'm just going to copy all of that. And just go back into policies and create a new policy. So create your own policy. And just going to copy that into there. So what I'm going to do is so we've got our statements here. So we've got our two statements for our S3 service to list the bucket and also to get, put and delete objects on that bucket. So I'm just going to add another one in here, which is going to give access to the AWS Lambda function. So I've just pasted that in there now. So let's have a look at that. So we've got our statement there with our multiple objects in there. So we've got our statement array, with the objects in there. So the first one we've got here is the S3 get, put and delete an object from that resource. Your bucket name will of course be different, as all bucket names need to be unique. Then we've got the same list bucket permission on that resource. So then we've added this other one in here. So what that's doing is allowing invoke, list and get Lambda calls on our Lambda resource here, our Lambda function. And so you'll need to copy your resource name over, which will be different from mine, from your Lambda page. So just copy that over and put that in here. Okay. And we just need to give that a name. Okay, so we're just going to call it Facebook-Lambda-S3. So it's giving permission to S3 and Lambda. We'll leave description out of there. It's pretty well fine for now. So just click on Create Policy. And there's our policy that's been created. So we need to now go into our roles. We need to select our Facebook backspace role that we used for our application. So I've already deleted that policy that was, or detached that policy that was on there. And so we'll put the new policy on there. So just to attach policy, and we'll select just search for Facebook. So there's our old policy there. And this is our new one, Facebook-Lambda-S3. So we'll attach that policy there. And there we go. So that's attached in there now. And so now when the application runs and uses that role, it will be able to connect into the Lambda service and invoke Lambda functions for us. So I've just jumped back into the Atom IDE, and I've opened up the folder that we used for our previous lab on IAM and S3, where we created our backspace shopping list application. And we're just going to add in a couple more buttons. So after the delete list button, we're just going to add in some more buttons in there. Okay, and so they're just to invoke the Lambda function, and we're also going to get the Lambda function later on. So we'll just Control S to save that. And then we're just going to jump into our app.js, our JavaScript code. And we're just going to put in another little bit of code here in the variables. So we've got the S3 variable definition there. So we'll just put in another one for Lambda. So in the same, Lambda equals new AWS Lambda. And now we just need to create some button events for our new buttons. So I'll just paste those in now. Okay, so we're just going to be calling an invoke Lambda function and a get Lambda function. So we'll just scroll down to where we get our S3 credentials. So this is our Facebook login. And there we're creating our temporary AWS credentials. So here we're creating our S3 credentials. So we're going to do the same for Lambda. So lambda.config credentials equals new AWS web identity credentials. So the same as what we've done there. So now we just need to create our invoke Lambda function so that when we click on the button, it has somewhere to go to. So scroll down to the end here. So there's our S3 functions. We'll put it after our S3 functions. Oh no, we'll put it after our local storage functions. Okay, so we'll just put it in here. Okay, so just put that in there in its own little section. I'll just change that from S3 functions there to Lambda functions. Okay, so what are we doing here? So we're, first of all, got some parameters that we need to pass. So the essential parameter there required is the name of the Lambda function, which we've got there. And then we've got the type of invocation and log type that we've got there. So then we're going to pass our payload. Okay, so that again, as we had before with our test function, it'll be doing the same thing as our test function. It'll be passing these three keys in an object to our Lambda function. And so then we can do Lambda invoke. So we can invoke that Lambda function and pass those parameters to our function. And then we've got our success and fail callbacks. So if there's an error, we'll just growl that and console log out the error. If successful, then we'll just create a little growl message just saying that that was fine, and we're going to console log out the response data as well. So now we can just save that again. So we've saved both the index.html and app.js, and we can run that. So we're just going to go into now the S3 management console, and we're going to go into our bucket that we've created for our application, and make sure that it's the same one that we've used in our IAM policy that allows S3 access. So what we're going to do is upload our new index.js and app.js. So index.js, app.js, and open that up. Okay, set details, set permissions, and make sure everything is public, and start upload. Okay, that's finished. So now we'll just go through to our website and run it. Okay, so it's done everything fine there. Retrieve local database, nothing to sync, fine. Okay, so the Facebook logging's worked fine. So now we can look at invoking our Lambda function. So we've got our two buttons that we created here. One of them works, the other one won't be doing anything. So we just click on invoke Lambda function. Okay, so we have a message there, invoked Lambda function. So that seems to have worked fine. So if we now just click on F12, and we'll run that again. Okay, and we should be able to see something from the console now. Okay, so that looks fine. It looks like it's done exactly what we want. So it's we'll just open that up a little bit. So it's returned. This is a value from browser, which is what we're expecting, and we've got a status code of 200, which is fine. So now let's look at creating our get Lambda function as well. So that's just going to get the details of our Lambda function. So what we're going to do there is pass some parameters. The only required parameter that we need is the name of the function, of course. And we're just going to pass the name of the function to the get function method of the Lambda SDK. And again, we're going to just growl out that we got the AWS Lambda function, and we're going to console log out the response data as well. So we'll just again control S that, and then we'll just go into S3 and upload that again. And again, make sure it's public. Okay, so that's uploaded. So we'll just go back into our shopping list app and we'll refresh that. Okay, so nothing to sync, that's fine. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get that Lambda function. So we'll just click on Get Lambda function and see what happens. Okay, so we got the AWS Lambda function. So again, we'll just do F12 on that and we'll run that again and see what we get out of the console. So we'll just run that again. Okay, so we've got our AWS Lambda function, that's fine. So we'll just go back into the console and see what happens. Okay, so got something returned here from the console, which looks pretty good. So we'll just look at configuration here, and we can see here it's returned all of the details of our backspace Lambda function. So it's got the function name there, and it's got the handler for it. The role ARN, and it's running NodeJS with a 3-second timeout, and that worked perfectly. So that's the end of part one of this two-part lab. So in the next part, we're going to look at a different way of triggering an AWS Lambda function, and we're going to use AWS S3 events. And so we're going to create a new Lambda function, which will have the image magic npm package in it. And what we're going to use is we're going to use that image magic package to grab images that are quite large that are being uploaded to Amazon S3 and automatically trigger when an image has been uploaded to compress that image into a thumbnail image. And we'll do that again automatically through S3 events. So I will see you in the next part.